Fabio Siciliano, the head of Italy's National Civil Protection, stood in Niscemi, Sicily, and said 6 words that no emergency official ever wants to say. The entire hill is collapsing. Not at risk of collapsing, not showing signs of instability, collapsing, present tense. The man responsible for managing disasters across an entire nation, describing an inhabited hillside beneath a town of 25,000 people as currently actively failing beneath their feet. He then announced that a permanent relocation plan must be defined and that a census is underway of people who will need to be sustained. Not temporary housing, permanent relocation. On Sunday, January 25, 2026, at 1 p.m., families in Niscemi were sitting down to lunch when a deep, grinding boom rolled up from underground. Within 4 minutes, over 500 people were forced to grab what they could carry and run, plates still steaming on tables, doors left open. By nightfall, that number climbed past 1,500. Within days, past 1,800. The landslide front now stretches over 4 kilometers, roughly 50 soccer fields laid end to end. The scarp, the vertical cliff where the ground tore itself apart, stands over 20 meters high in places. That is a 6-story building of raw, exposed earth where homes and streets existed days before, and it is still advancing. But here is what makes this genuinely unprecedented. Niscemi has been here before. This exact hillside, these exact neighborhoods, collapsed catastrophically 29 years ago. 400 people evacuated, 48 homes demolished, an 18th century church torn down while residents formed human shields trying to stop the wrecking crews. Authorities called it ordinary maladministration. In the 29 years between that disaster and this one, not a single structural intervention was performed on the slope. The geology was left untouched, and now a geologist has described what comes next as mathematically inevitable. Drone footage captured in the days following reveals the full geometry of the catastrophe. Dozens of homes perched on the precipice edge, foundations exposed where the ground pulled away beneath them. The raw, scarp face tells its own story in color, yellow sand above gray clay. 2 geological layers, whose relationship is the reason this hillside is failing and will continue to fail. When residents ran outside on January 25th, they did not see what anyone associates with a landslide. No wall of mud racing downhill, no debris flow. What they saw was far more disturbing. The ground itself was translating. Entire blocks sliding forward as coherent units, homes intact, but drifting slowly toward the valley as the earth beneath them flowed like paste. The sound was a sustained, bone-deep grinding from underground, so powerful residents poured into the streets convinced it was an earthquake. It was the same sound reported 29 years earlier. Then asphalt streets split in real time, cracks propagating like veins through pavement. Cars hung suspended over newly formed voids. The western edge of town began visibly separating from the rest of Niscemi. Think about that for a second. 4 minutes. Less time than boiling water for pasta. That is how long families had to decide what mattered enough to carry and what would be left behind, potentially forever. Oh, this was not the first landslide to hit Niscemi. It was not even the first one that month. 9 days earlier, on January 16th, the earth had already moved. Provincial Road 12 was destroyed as sections of pavement dropped meters below their original elevation. Gas lines ruptured, fiber optic cables severed. Monitoring equipment detected continuing creep toward the plain of Gela at rates of several centimeters per day. Authorities treated it as an isolated event. Engineers assumed movement would decelerate. 9 days later, that assumption proved catastrophically wrong. But here is what truly disturbs me about Niscemi. The January 16th failure was not the first warning. It was not even the loudest. To find that, you have to go back 29 years to a Sunday afternoon that residents describe in language almost identical to January 25th, Divi tukstoshi divdesmitsestes. On October 12, 1997, the same neighborhoods, Sante Croce, Pirillo, Canalicchio failed in the same way. Same underground boom, same Sunday afternoon, over 400 evacuated. Franco Barberi, the Undersecretary of Civil Protection and a volcanologist, called it ordinary maladministration and complete degradation in a geologically restricted zone. A state of emergency was declared and extended repeatedly until at least 2007. A full decade of declared emergency. 48 homes were demolished. The 18th century church of Sante Croce was ordered torn down. A dozen residents formed human shields around the building. Legal battles and protests followed for months. The church was destroyed anyway. And after all of that, no drainage, no stabilization, no intervention of any kind was performed on the slope. Giuseppe Colura of Sigea, and Italy's Society for Environmental Geology, was blunt. After 1997, the probability of a repeat event was extremely high, especially because the slope received no intervention, despite contained signals of continuing movement. And in 1790, Franciscan friars documented the earth opening in these same neighborhoods. Water stopped flowing in the drinking troughs. The same ground, failing the same way, for at least 236 years. 3 documented failures across 3 centuries, each larger than the last. So what pushed 236 years of precarious geology past the breaking point? Cyclone Harry, a rare Mediterranean tropical-like cyclone that stalled over Sicily from January 12th to 15th, 2026. Parts of Calabria received 570 millimeters of rain in 72 hours. Average annual precipitation for the region ranges between 400 and 600 millimeters, on an entire year's rainfall compressed into a single weekend. Coastal wave heights reached 16 meters, 52 feet, higher than a 5-story building. Damage across Sicily's coasts exceeded 1.5 billion euros, a once-per-century storm. All the water fell onto ancient seabed geology. Sicily's interior is built from layers of permeable sand sitting on impermeable clay. Under normal conditions, the system functions. Rainwater infiltrates through sand, drains laterally at the clay boundary, and the ground holds. But saturate it with a year's rainfall in 3 days, and the physics reverse catastrophically. Water accumulates at the sand-clay interface, building what geologists call pore pressure, the force exerted by water trapped in the soil. It pushes particles apart, reduces friction. The clay absorbs moisture, swells, weakens. The contact zone transforms from stable foundation into a lubricated sliding surface. Fausto Guzzetti, one of Italy's foremost landslide researchers, former director of the Institute for Hydrogeological Protection Research, and fellow of the Accademia dei Lincei, put it simply. It is as if we placed a sponge on top of glass. The clay's mechanical properties collapsed, and the sliding initiated along the interface. A sponge on glass. That is what 25,000 people built their community on. Unlike shallow landslides that trigger instantly, deep-seated failures operate on a delay. Water needs time to penetrate to depth. Cyclone Harry ended January 15th. First failure came January 16th. Catastrophic expansion came January 25th, 10 days after the rain stopped. A slow-motion detonation. And Guzzetti raised a devastating question. Did the town make it worse? Waterproofed roads concentrating runoff, leaking sewers, cracked water mains, all funneling water into the failure layer for decades. The town was not merely sitting on a time bomb, it was winding the clock. Now here is the number that makes this a certainty rather than a prediction. Every granular material has an angle of repose, the steepest angle at which it maintains a stable slope. Think of pouring sand onto a table. The cone never exceeds a fixed angle. For Niscemi's sandy soils, that angle is 35 degrees. Riccardo Ferraro of Sigea measured the current scarp at 85 degrees, nearly vertical. A wall of sand standing at more than double the angle the material can physically sustain. The landslide must advance further, Not might. Must. No engineering solution changes this arithmetic. The scarp will retreat inland, consuming whatever stands in its path until the slope reaches equilibrium. Physics does not negotiate. Giovanna Papalardo, professor of applied geology at the University of Catania, confirmed retrogressive evolution, progressive propagation toward the town center. Each collapse removes support from the material behind it, setting up the next failure. The process feeds itself. Kalura revealed that the January 25th collapse overlaps with the 1997 footprint. The two events are merging across decades. The red zone, initially 100 meters from the scarp edge, has been extended to 150 meters. Off limits to everyone, firefighters and police included. Regional maps already classified Niscemi as very high risk 4 years ago. The risk was upgraded in 2022 after ground movement was documented in 2019 on the exact roads the landslide later destroyed. Mapped, classified, upgraded. Met with silence. Vice Mayor Pietro Stimolo noted that many structures were built before 1977, when building permits were not required, suggesting no irregularities. The absence of regulation is offered as defense against the absence of intervention. Every engineering response fails at this scale. Retaining walls cannot reach a failure surface tens of meters deep. Drainage cannot cover a 4-kilometer active zone no one can enter. Slope regrading is impossible while material continues failing. Siciliano's answer was not a repair plan, it was a relocation census. The 1,800 evacuees exist in agonizing limbo. Homes still standing, possessions exactly where they were left, but sitting in a zone where the ground might fail tomorrow or next month. Flora Malve, a lifelong resident, said it plainly. Have you ever seen a sandcastle? That is what is happening to Niscemi. Watching our territory crumble is like watching your own being disintegrate. Schools closed indefinitely. The sports palace converted to a shelter. Families retreating to countryside homes, opening them to neighbors with nowhere else to go. The cruelest detail is the repetition. The 1997 evacuees also left Sunday lunch with plates steaming. They too watched homes demolished. They too were promised it would not happen again. Now their grandchildren sleep on camp beds in the same sports hall, asking the same unanswered question. Guzzetti's warning extends far beyond Niscemi. The same sand over clay geology exists across Emilia-Romagna, the Adriatic coast, Tuscany, and Sicily. Most of these communities were built during the post-war decades, an era of rapid construction and limited geological awareness. Italy holds the European record with 680,000 mapped landslides, 1,200 under active monitoring right now. In Emilia-Romagna alone, 80,000 landslides triggered during the May 2023 floods across just 5,000 to 6,000 square kilometers. Niscemi is not an anomaly. It is one of many. Is this a containable event that stabilizes once saturated soils drain and the hillside finds equilibrium? Evidence that Cyclone Harry fundamentally destabilized geology across Sicily for years to come? Or proof that communities on clay-rich slopes face a reckoning where extreme weather activates failures no available engineering can prevent? That question has no answer yet. Somewhere beneath Niscemi, in saturated clay layers meters below the surface, the ground continues its slow transformation from solid to fluid. The scarp stands at 85 degrees. Physics requires 35. The arithmetic is patient. It does not negotiate. It does not respond to emergency declarations or political promises, or the desperate hope of 1,800 people who want to go home. The monitoring instruments continue recording displacement. Engineers search for deceleration signals that have not appeared. Teachers conduct lessons over video calls to children who cannot return to their schools. And a hillside that has been failing since Franciscan friars documented the earth opening in 1790, that collapsed again in 1997 while authorities called it ordinary maladministration. That was classified very high risk on maps that led to no intervention. Oh, that was flagged again in 2019 and upgraded in 2022 and still received no structural response. Continues its inexorable slide toward the plain of Gela. They were warned. The maps said very high risk. The geology said marginally stable. The history said it will happen again. And for 29 years, the answer was silence, until the ground answered for itself.